Voters give schools in Jefferson County a green light, saying yes to millions of dollars in additional taxes for a long list of enhancements in the district. The second largest school system in Colorado will upgrade and re-equip many of its facilities, giving their young students the best possible chance of success in a complex and ever-changing workplace. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's conversation, a look at how Jefferson County School Administrators will spend the dollars that voters gave them in the November elections. Among our guests today, Jefferson County School Superintendent Dr. Jason Glass, who provided us this general overview of where the dollars are going to go.
Hi, I'm Jason Glass, Superintendent and Chief Learner with Jeffco Public Schools. Well, the results of this November's election are in, and voters in Jeffco have approved ballot questions 5A and 5B, which will make a tremendous difference for our schools. Funds from ballot question 5A will allow Jeffco Public Schools to increase our competitiveness with surrounding school districts, add supports for safety and security, and add career technical programming in Jeffco. Funds from ballot question 5B will allow us to make significant improvements to school buildings and facilities all across Jeffco. I want to extend a sincere and heartfelt thank you to all who gave of your time and energy in advocating for our students and our schools. This election is yet another sign that Jeffco Public Schools is on the right track, and it is an important and tangible signal that the community has confidence in the direction of our school district. This is no accident. We've worked hard to build this support, listening to the community and shaping our future path based on the direction and input from our teachers, parents, students, and community members. Thanks also to everyone involved with the We Are Jeffco campaign, the advocacy group for questions 5A and 5B, whose members volunteered their time to educate our voters on the issues and generate support all across our community. Thanks also to our parents, staff, and community members who supported Jeffco Public Schools throughout this election. It's your dedication that makes the future of Jeffco students so bright. We're now focused on moving forward to put the new resources you've given us to good use. We're already working on revising the budget for this year to take into account these new funds and to get construction crews on site and ready to work this spring. So today, we're celebrating great news. On behalf of all of us with Jeffco Public Schools, thank you. And we'll work to make you so proud of your community schools.
And Dr. Glass is with us in the studio today for more specifics on this wild finish of an outcome for 5A and 5B. He is joined by his Executive Director of Facilities, Tim Reed, who will manage this windfall of tax dollars into new buildings and rebuilding projects. And Kevin Carroll is here today as well. He is the Chief Student Success Officer. Great title. I don't know if you came up with that or maybe your superintendent did. It's very appropriate. And he'll be implementing and redesigning programs for mental health support, so important in today's school environment and so important to many of your parents and students. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
If this were another show about winnings, it would be the Colorado Lottery show, and the three of you would be the three winners. I'd be introducing you as these guys who really had a marvelous night in what was essentially a real nail biter. And Doctor, you say that you've really never seen one that close break towards the winners. Those usually break towards the losers.
Right. Well, on election night, when the first ballots came in, I think it was all of the early votes that were counted and presented right at 7 o'clock. And question 5A, which is the mill levy override for ongoing expenses, was winning by a fairly hefty margin. But then question 5B, which is our bond for construction, was down by about 9,000 votes. And I think there was a lot of consternation and wondering about what happened. And I just kept watching the numbers and saying, I think there's about 100,000 votes that haven't been counted. And sure enough, over the next several days, as more votes were counted, the margin just kept closing until eventually, about 10 days after Election Day, we were able to cross over and ended up winning by 1,700 votes.
How about that? I think a lot of parents in Jefferson County are very happy that it broke the way that it did. So this is about, tell me, question any of my figures here, because I'm just pulling them out of my head. about $49 per $100,000 in assessment per household, roughly.
That sounds about right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so literally millions of dollars for all kinds of projects. But I've always wondered, so the voters have awarded you these dollars. Do they just arrive the next day? I mean, what is the mechanism for the delivery of this money to the school system?
Well, there are different pathways. So for the mill levy override, the funds that we use for paying our teachers and staff more, adding mental health supports, those sorts of things, that's collected through a property tax that will be collected in this budget year, but not until later in the spring of 2019. So we don't have those dollars right now. We will later in the spring, April or May, have those dollars on hand, and then they'll be available for us going forward for years beyond that. On question 5B, the bond, which is again used for capital construction projects, we go to the bond market, which we are planning to do later this week or even early next week. We're watching the bond market to see how that's changing and trying to think when is the most advantageous time for us to be in the bond market. This is a really good time. Some of the fluctuations and dynamics in the stock market and the economy right now are actually favoring us in going to the bond market. People are moving out of stocks into things that are more secure, like bonds. So it's a really good time for us. And we're ahead of the curve. We're ahead of some other school districts around the state and around the country, so we've moved really early. And so that is going to generate around $375 million in our first round of projects that we'll spend over the next couple of years.
So you're a superintendent and a financial planner too, so you wear all of those hats.
Right.
Well, I know that Tim already is looking at plans for different projects across the district, and I was telling him that in fact we've done, I don't know, as a journalist, I've myself maybe 8 or 9 stories on Green Mountain, which is kind of the poster child for a lot of the older buildings in this district, which Dr. Glass says some even go back to the 50s. So there is really tremendous need. But at Green Mountain particularly, and this is a quote from a teacher who said, we had our science hall torn apart. We had classrooms torn apart because of the water damage, which has been a significant feature there. She said we had a rodent problem in the school because of the water. We even had a little mouse through one of our staff meetings. So Green Mountain, I know the gym particularly with water underneath the floor is a priority. And Tim, you say that's a fairly high priority for the district.
As a matter of fact, we're in the process of interviewing architects this week, as we speak, actually, for Columbine High School. And then next week we'll be interviewing for Green Mountain High School and for Alameda High School, 2 very high priority projects for us. And then Arvada High School we will interview, I think, January 2nd. So those are the 4 major projects that we're pushing out the door right away. It's going to take about a year to plan those projects and then a couple of years to build them.
So remodels and rebuilds and general enhancement across the district.
Additions, yeah, remodels. Hopefully by the time you do your next interview at Green Mountain High School, you won't recognize it. We'll have brought it into the 21st century.
So many kids, so many needs, and so many wonderful teachers who have been watching this all go together. And now, Kevin, there is also the mental health piece. The district was awarded millions of dollars to deal with this problem as well, which goes to all 3 of your jobs, every administrator in the district, in fact, particularly given the school safety questions that we have been facing. A terrible year for mass shootings, almost as many mass shootings in the year as there are days in the year, 18 of those in schools, although Kevin makes the point very adroitly, I think, that schools remain one of the safest places to be in the country. Still, we know that perception is 9/10 of everything here, and a lot of parents still worry about their children being safe. So I want to show you all a video. It was released by 26 parents at Sandy Hook. It's called the Sandy Hook Promise, and it goes to the question of mental health and safety in our schools, and we'll talk about it after we watch this video.
Dang, bro, I'm so late. Yeah, I'm late to class, man. Yeah. Thinking about who I was gonna go for, probably Drew. Jasmine. No, bro, she's fake. She's fake.
President, here you go. Thank you. Hi guys, vote for me for class president. Hi ladies. I'm not voting for this. Can you believe this? Bye ladies.
Someone wrote dead man on my poster. Dude.
Is Sherlock right?
Just leave me alone.
You're not voting for your ex-boyfriend.
Here you go. Thank you. Hi guys, vote for me for class president.
Your principal speaking. Don't forget, cast your vote today.
All right, come on, guys. Gym class ended 5 minutes ago. Let's go.
Yo, stupid freak!
Look at me!
So there you have it, and this is a video getting a lot of attention, and it goes to the fear expressed by many parents. And Kevin, it is my sense as a parent and as a grandfather with grandkids in a little school out in California, that the mental health piece is pretty much at the heart of this in terms of finding kids who might be troubled in the student body, who might in fact make terrible problems for their other students and parents.
So mental health is significant, both for the general security of all students feeling safe and comfortable, as well as for those students who are struggling particularly with issues that might have them lashing out at others or at themselves. So we are finally in tune with those needs and have been very happy that our current school board has been very supportive over the last 3 years in bringing in additional mental health, and now our community is joining that effort in approving 5A, and we believe we'll be able to make some significant enhancements to what we already have in place.
Kevin, with these dollars that you have for mental health now, what kind of programs do you have that will actually form the new model for Jefferson County going forward here to help spot troubled students?
Absolutely. So we have several pieces that we're going to be able to leverage given the additional dollars from our community. One is to enhance our social emotional learning specialist program, which is steeped in what's called the CASTLE model. That's the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, and there are 5 different important components to that work. The first is around self-awareness, a student knowing themselves and what they need. Second is around self-management. So when I am in crisis, what do I do with that frustration or that worry to make sure that I'm okay? Third would be around relationship skills. How do I interact with others? Social awareness is the fourth, and responsible decision making is the one after that. So we'll be expanding our social emotional learning specialists, especially at our early grades, and that's for all students. And then we'll be providing some enhancements around suicide prevention and substance abuse concerns.
So early grades is elementary school, middle school?
So elementary school will have a tremendous emphasis on for that early intervention. We currently have social emotional learning specialists at all of our middle schools.
And can you just look at a kid and say to yourself, this is a kid that needs extra help, or is it completely invisible? I've always wondered how administrators go about identifying who's troubled and who's not.
I would say it's really important that kids are tuned in to at least one trusted adult in every building that they're in, because you can't determine based on looks or behaviors necessarily what a student might need. So having a close relationship with trusted adults really matters.
Dr. Glass, I know that when I talk to parents, nothing short of giving their child their own armed guard is going to make them feel good about their kids going to school, given all the publicity and all the problems, particularly in Jefferson County, where the Columbine district, I mean, but every district in the country has challenges. And I'm wondering, since now you're the guy on the hot seat, if you hear the same thing that I do from parents about these concerns about safety in your schools.
Well, I think certainly with the Parkland and Texas shootings this past spring, there's a heightened awareness that's certainly present in a community like Jeffco with our history of school shootings with Columbine and 2 shootings at Deer Creek Middle School. So there's a heightened sort of sensitivity to it here. I think Kevin's talked some about what we hope to do on the human side, and that's a major part of this. But there are really sort of 3 lenses I think we have to evaluate or look through when we think about school safety. One are things that we can do with the building itself, sort of physical changes, locking systems, secure entry systems, camera systems. Those are all things that Tim and his team are putting in place through the work of 5B. So we're going to see major improvements in the physical security or target hardening of our buildings. It's a terrible term to have to use to talk about schools, but it is what we talk about. How do we make our buildings more difficult to enter? The second is how we respond in the event of a crisis. We have wonderful relationships with law enforcement here in Jeffco. In most cases, in 2 to 3 minutes, we have law enforcement on scene. We drill for school violence issues continuously throughout the year. Our students know how to respond. There's a response protocol that we use. There are procedures that we have in place in every single one of our schools, as well as those relationships with law enforcement. But in addition to sort of the physical security and the crisis response, the most important thing that we can do is that proactive part. How do we identify when students are struggling and get them the supports and help that they need so that we avert a crisis?
Right. Again, the mental health piece just critical, but Tim makes a good point. So in all these new buildings and in all these renovations, you're building in all these new features, but the challenge is not to make the school look like a prison, which is what nobody wants.
That's correct. And we're kind of ahead of a lot of districts in what we've done in the past and everything else. And we continue to make improvements. We were making improvements even before the bond passed. So given this extra money, and we had categorized a substantial amount of money to go into this. So we're real excited about what we can bring basically to the table. But it is important to us that our schools are still welcoming educational environments.
Right. I'm wondering where you guys fall on this, because the national discussion, you hear everything from teachers being armed to armed guards in every school to parents who volunteer, with parents with military. I mean, you've heard everything. We've heard the entire spectrum. What is the best approach to safety in our schools besides fortifying buildings?
So I might just offer that, thanks to Dr. Glass, we hosted a community safety and security task force for about 6 months to bring everyone together as a community and say, what do we feel is best collectively around that, using the experts that we have internally, folks from law enforcement, parents, other community members, and ask that very question. So they were able to produce a report for the Board of Education that listed what their priorities were, and they're directly aligned to what Tim is doing with his work in buildings and what I'm doing around mental health.
It's really a mixture of looking at and considering best practices, so evaluating previous instances of school violence and learning from those. And every single time one of those happens, we evaluate it and update and change our procedures, consider what we do in response to what happened there. So that's an element of it, is building best practices. Some of the considerations are political. A lot of the solutions that have been put forth are put forth from a political frame. But I think what Kevin's touching on is a great deal of what you do as a community is dependent on what are the community's values. And that's really a conversation with citizens, with parents, with students, with our staff around what we want for Jeffco, what system do we want in place in our community.
I know I've spent a lot of time on this, but I've explained to you that I had a lot of parents say to me, when you talk to those guys, you tell them I gave them money to protect my kid. And so I want to be able to say to them, okay, I saw him and I talked to him about it, and here it comes. So I think that's very productive. I know in elections like this, having covered them for years, there's two things people don't want to vote for. Well, first of all, they don't want to raise their taxes, so that's a heavy lift. And secondly, they don't want to give money to school administrators. They just don't want to do it. But interesting, in your ask in this election, you actually said very specifically, none of this money will go to increase the salaries of school administrators. And Dr. Glass, here you are. I must say, you're the prize pony right now. I mean, you came into a school district that was having, let's face it, a lot of transformational difficulties. You've really fixed a lot of that, and here you are, the guy sitting in the chair after a very successful election. So congratulations on all of that. So I don't begrudge you a dime of what you make, but you are the highest paid guy in the state, actually. You're ahead of Dr. Henry Bull in Cherry Creek. You're ahead of the superintendent in Douglas County, and I don't begrudge you a dime of that, but what do you say to parents who say, you guys make too much money?
Well, I think It is an increased sensitivity in the community that the amount of money that is being spent on administration. So we wanted to clearly say that these funds are going into schools and they're going to support kids and teachers and programs for our students. And so we just wrote right into the ballot language that none of the funds can be used for senior district administration. So we intended the funds to make an impact on students, and then we codified that in the ballot language. And now it's a legal requirement around how these funds are spent both on 5A and on 5B. We're comfortable doing that because, again, in our hearts, we want the funds to go to the students. And when we evaluate the district's entire budget, the senior district administration, for all the attention that it gets, is a tiny fraction of Jeffco's total expenditures. So even though it's a small amount, we know that it's a political consideration, and we wanted to put something into this ballot question to give our voters confidence that the funds would be impacting students.
There's been a recent shift in how a lot of people feel about it. They say, pay the policemen, pay the firemen, and pay my school administrators because they've got my kids for 8 hours a day and they're in charge of protecting them. So that seems to be a shifting dynamic, but prior to the election, maybe not so much. Regarding teachers, you mentioned them. Issue 5A will allow Jeffco to offer competitive compensation to some of the best educators and keep them here. On average, teachers in Boulder make $75,000, Cherry Creek $71,000, Littleton third at $66,000. Jeffco falls below all three with an average of $57,000 a teacher. And questioning in my figures because this is
Sounds about right.
About right. So now you have an opportunity to fix that as well.
Well, we'll make some progress. So 5A really closes some of the gap that we have with surrounding districts. Some of the districts that we compete with for talent have passed multiple mill levy overrides over the years. 5A helps us close some of that gap. We're going to put about half of the money from 5A, about $15 million, into compensation for our employees. That sounds like it is a lot of money, but Jeffco is a large organization. $15 million is around enough to give 2.25% increase to our employees. So we're going to do that, and then we'll also use money that comes into the district from the state legislature through the School Finance Act and bundle that together to give our employees a nice raise for this next school year coming up. So this won't solve all our problems, but things are going to get better because of 5A.
For school districts, it always comes down to money and process. And Tim, we were talking about you're actually going to rebuild at least one school and maybe more. But you say that's a difficult process because you can't tear one down until you build the new one. Tell me how that works.
That was one of the criteria that we looked at when we determined to replace, for example, Kendrick Lakes.
K-Lakes, right,
which is
a very old school.
It was built in 1970.
Right.
So we were looking at sites that were large enough to support the construction of a new building while keeping the old building in operation, because we don't really want to interrupt the educational experience of the students by breaking them up, closing the building, sending them off to various neighboring elementary schools. We successfully did this with the Kendrick Lakes sister school up in Arvada, which was Sierra Elementary. That was rebuilt in 2017, and what we did was we did phase one in 2009, and then we've waited all of this time until actually the board voted certificates of participation to fund both the Three Creeks building, which was the first new school we've opened in 10 years, up in northwest Arvada, and replace or do phase two of Sierra, which was the classroom. So we did that. We constructed it while the original building was there, and then after the construction was completed, we knocked down the original building, converted it to fields and parking spaces. A very successful project, and we're looking forward to doing that at Kendrick Lakes as well.
I know a lot of people ask about that process. Kevin, I wanted to ask you, back to the safety issue, if you don't mind, one more question. Do you drill students in Jefferson County for active shooter situations?
We absolutely do.
And what is it all grades? Is it young kids as well as older kids? And what is the impact on kids?
So we actually serve kids pre-K through 21, and we drill all of them. And so every year, principals get a training from our safety and security team about what those drills are to look like. And then members of that safety and security team come into the buildings for the drills to oversee them and to help schools improve where there may be issues that they need to take care of. They're required to do at least 2 of those major drills a year in addition to their regular fire drills and other regular precautions that they take.
I know when I was a kid, I still had blueprints to the wheel, then it was a class that I took, but we did Cold War drills. You know, there were drills for you know, a nuclear attack. And I know parents were furious about it because they said, you know, there's never going to be a nuclear attack, and this does, you know, gives my kids more concern, does more harm than good. But a different environment today, and the likelihood of this now, statistically, is increasing. So what do you say to parents who say, you know, this is a little over the top and unnecessary?
So there's two things that I would say. One, we use what's called a standard response protocol to increase consistency across the system, and that actually gives our students a greater sense of comfort. I had the opportunity to be a principal in this district for 16 different years, and one of those years there was an issue in the neighborhood, not at the school, and we actually closed down the school. And there was a reverse 911 call that was made, and people were told to stay in their homes. And what families shared with me the next day when we had an event was kids wanted to come to school because they knew what to do.
Right.
They knew how to be safe. And in fact, I had 650 kids at that time, and 250 came to school and brought their families with them. Came through police lines and said, this is where we know how to be safe.
Right.
So they didn't go out to breakfast, they didn't go to grandma's in Aurora, they came to school because they felt safe.
I know that happened recently out in California, the Paradise Fires. All the little kids wanted to reconnect with their classmates, and they're kind of all connected anyway these days, am I right? I mean, they're all on their Kindles, or some of them even have phones, their tablets or whatever. I mean, electronically they're all connected, and it's kind of this constant ongoing thing where everybody's kind of connected to each other in the schools.
Yes. Well, building on some of the things Kevin talked about, the size of Jeffco, we have threats, things that come into schools in various forms daily. Almost every week something is happening where we're working some kind of active threat situation. Almost always it turns out to be unfounded, but frequently we are, depending on the situation, using those drills, using those procedures that we've worked with staff and students to keep them safe.
Is there pressure on you in terms of priorities for, I guess my question is, are there pools of money already laid out in your plan for following the election here for where everything goes, or is there parent pressure or administrative pressure for the pools of dollars that need to go other places that maybe weren't allocated for?
Well, I think the Jeffco Board of Education was very sensitive that the public wanted transparency around where the funds would be spent. And so before the election, the board passed a resolution declaring where dollars in 5A and where dollars in 5B would be going. So 5A, half of it is going into compensation. Around 20% of the funds are going into school safety and security, 10% for career technical education, 10% for technology and curriculum, and another 10% for early childhood. So we've got those categories. We're working now to develop budgets within those categories for 5A. And then on 5B, the construction programs, we published hundreds of pages of documents around where the funds would be spent and what each building could expect. And so those are still available on the website. They were preliminary plans, but we use them as a touchstone and guide for where improvements will be made in our buildings. So a lot of the decisions around funds, where funds would go, were made before the election in an effort to be abundantly transparent with our voters.
And 2 years ago, virtually the same ask, I think it was 2 years ago, and you were soundly refused. No, we're not paying for this. We're not giving them a dime. And now here you are, the new king of the school appropriation hill, so to speak.
Yeah, we made
what was different about it?
Well, we made a 7-point improvement over 2016 on our mill levy and a 5-point improvement on our bond. So I think those are both significant shifts. Some of that certainly had to do with the demographics and turnout of this election in 2018, but I also think that there is a sense that the district is headed in the right direction and that we did the work to make sure that the proposal we put on the ballot was the right fit for the community.
Well, it's a remarkable thing. Typically my experience in these elections is that I end up talking to the losers. It's such a pleasure to get to talk to the winners and to learn where the money is going to go. And I know that that's been a big topic for a lot of your parents now. They're very excited and very anxious to see how it all comes together, particularly those kids in buildings that need serious work, because there's a lot of heavy lifting to do in the district. Thanks all of you for taking time today and being my guest.
Thank you.
Great good luck to you going forward, and I hope in the next election you can come back in and we'll talk about the next dollars. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to all of you for joining us again, and let's have another conversation soon.